My name is Geraldine, and at 63 I've spent my life sharing my passion for art with high school students across Arizona. After divorcing Harold, a wealthy businessman and father to our daughter Amanda, I found happiness in my second marriage to Frank, a kind-hearted science teacher. Nothing could have prepared me for the moment at Amanda's wedding when I was directed to sit in the back row while Harold sat proudly in front beside our daughter. The words still echo in my mind. Dad paid for everything. He's a somebody. You're just a teacher. If you're watching this from anywhere in the world, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like to hear how I walked away from my own daughter's wedding with my dignity intact. I grew up in Tempe, Arizona, in a neighborhood where most families worked hard for modest comforts. My father was a postal worker, my mother a part-time librarian. They raised me to value education, creativity, and kindness above material possessions. From an early age, I found joy in creating art, transforming simple materials into expressions of beauty. My parents, recognizing my passion, scraped together money for art supplies and occasional classes at the local community center. High school was where I discovered my second passion, teaching. My art teacher, Mrs. Lambert, saw potential in my work, but also in my patience when helping classmates. "You explain things in ways that make sense, Geraldine," she told me one afternoon as I guided a frustrated student through a difficult technique. "That's a rare gift." Those words planted a seed that would grow into my life's purpose. When I enrolled at Arizona State University to study art education, my parents beamed with pride. I was the first in our family to attend college, carrying their dreams alongside my own. Campus life opened a new world to me, one filled with diverse perspectives and possibilities. I thrived in my classes, especially those where I could combine technical skills with creative expression. During my sophomore year, I met Harold in an elective economics class I'd taken to fulfill a requirement. He was everything I wasn't, confident to the point of arrogance from a wealthy family in Scottsdale, studying business with his future already mapped out by his father's connections. Yet something sparked between us. Perhaps it was the attraction of opposites, or maybe how my genuine nature contrasted with the calculating people who typically surrounded him. Harold pursued me with the same determination he applied to everything in life. He found my artistic sensibilities charming, my lack of pretension refreshing. I was flattered by his attention, impressed by his ambitious plans, and I admit somewhat dazzled by glimpses into his privileged world. When he took me to dinner at restaurants I couldn't have afforded on my student budget, or introduced me to his country club friends, I felt special chosen. Looking back, I can see the early warning signs I chose to ignore. The way Harold would subtly critique my clothing choices before meeting his family. His embarrassment when I enthusiastically discussed becoming a public school teacher. His insistence that I accompany him to business networking events instead of attending art shows with my classmates. Small compromises that seemed insignificant in isolation, but formed a pattern I was too inexperienced to recognize. We married the summer after graduation, when we were both 22. My parents hosted a modest backyard wedding that Harold's family attended with polite dismay. His mother commented on the quaint decorations I had handcrafted, her voice carrying both condescension and concern about her son's choice. The wedding was the first battleground in what would become a lifelong war between Harold's world of status and appearances and my values of authenticity and creativity. The early years of our marriage were a constant adjustment as Harold climbed the corporate ladder at his father's investment firm. We moved into a house in an upscale neighborhood that made me uncomfortable with its manicured perfection. I took a position teaching art at a public high school, much to Harold's disappointment. He had envisioned me taking a break from work to focus on becoming the ideal corporate wife, hosting dinner parties, and joining the right charitable committees. "Teaching is fine as a hobby," he would say, "but you don't need to work. It reflects poorly on my ability to provide." I stood my ground on keeping my career one of the few battles I consistently won. My classroom became my sanctuary, a place where I could be fully myself without judgment. My students' appreciation for art and for my guidance filled a growing emptiness in my personal life. When I became pregnant with Amanda at 25, Harold was delighted, particularly when we learned we were having a girl. "She'll be beautiful like you," he said, "but ambitious like me." Even then, he was mapping out her future according to his values, not considering she might forge her own path. Amanda's early childhood was a fragile balancing act. I tried to introduce her to the joy of creativity finger painting alongside her on our kitchen floor, teaching her to see beauty in ordinary things. Harold countered with expensive toys, designer children's clothes, and early enrollment in activities that would look good on future applications to exclusive schools. As Harold's success grew, so did his obsession with status. Our home was renovated to feature in a local luxury magazine. My artwork was removed from prominent walls to make room for expensive pieces by recognized names. Harold began criticizing my appearance more openly, suggesting cosmetic procedures and expensive clothing brands that would better reflect his position. The emotional abuse was subtle at first, remarks disguised as helpful suggestions, comparisons to other executives' wives, disappointment expressed through sighs rather than words. But over time it became more overt. Harold would belittle my career accomplishments in front of friends, cut me off mid-sentence at dinner parties, or simply act as if I were invisible when important business associates visited our home. I tried to shield Amanda from witnessing this dynamic, but children absorb more than we realize. When she was 9, she came home from a playdate at a friend's house looking confused. "Mommy Sophia's mom teaches piano, and her dad says it's really special. Why does Daddy say your teaching job is just a hobby?" By the time Amanda was 12, Harold's affairs had become an open secret among his business circle. He made minimal effort to hide them, seemingly confident I wouldn't leave due to financial dependence. What he didn't understand was that I had stayed not for money, but in hopes of maintaining a stable home for Amanda. When I found evidence of yet another relationship on his phone, accidentally left open to intimate messages, something finally broke within me. Our divorce when Amanda was 13 was bitter and revealing. Harold seemed less concerned about losing me than about the inconvenience and potential social embarrassment. He hired the most aggressive divorce attorney in Arizona, determined to minimize my financial settlement and limit my claim on the lifestyle to which Amanda had become accustomed. The custody arrangement gave us shared legal custody, but Harold's resources allowed him to undermine my relationship with Amanda in countless subtle ways. When she stayed with me in the modest house I purchased with my settlement, Harold would call with emergencies that required her to return to his home. Weekend visits were disrupted by surprise tickets to concerts or spontaneous shopping trips to Los Angeles that Amanda couldn't resist. Most damaging were the constant comparisons. "Mum's house doesn't have a pool. That's too bad. Your mum can't afford that summer program. Don't worry, I'll handle it." Each statement reinforced the narrative that I was lacking less than unable to provide what a proper parent should. Amanda's teenage years coincided with her growing awareness of social status. She began to view my life choices through the lens Harold had crafted. My dedication to teaching became an embarrassing failure to achieve real success. My handmade gifts were appreciated less than Harold's extravagant purchases. My values of authenticity and creativity seemed quaint and naive compared to Harold's emphasis on appearances and connections. Meeting Frank was an unexpected gift during this difficult period. A fellow teacher at my school, he taught chemistry with a passion that matched my love for art. Divorced himself after his wife left for someone more ambitious. Frank understood the wounds inflicted by a partner who valued status above character. Our friendship evolved naturally into romance built on mutual respect and shared values. When we married after 2 years of dating, Amanda, then 17, attended the small ceremony with obvious discomfort. Harold had poisoned the well, suggesting that my remarriage proved I had moved on from caring about Amanda. Nothing could have been further from the truth, but the narrative took hold in my daughter's vulnerable teenage mind. Frank and I built a life that was modest in material terms but rich in meaning. Our combined teaching salaries afforded a comfortable home in a middle-class neighborhood. We spent summers traveling to art festivals and science museums, our vacations centered around learning and exploration rather than luxury resorts. We found joy in simple pleasures, cooking together, hiking Arizona's beautiful landscapes, building community with like-minded colleagues and friends. This life so fulfilling to us became increasingly incomprehensible to Amanda as she absorbed Harold's value system. During her visits, which became less frequent as she entered college, she would look around our home with barely disguised pity. "Don't you want more than this, Mom?" she asked, once genuinely puzzled. The question revealed the growing chasm between us, one I desperately wanted to bridge but didn't know how. Amanda's college years accelerated our estrangement. Harold spared no expense sending her to Vanderbilt University, an expensive private institution where she studied business with a focus on marketing. Each time she returned home for breaks, she seemed more polished, more distant, more like Harold. Our phone calls became less frequent, with Amanda always swamped with projects or heading out to networking events. When we did connect, she spoke animatedly about internship opportunities at prestigious firms, sorority functions, and weekend trips to New York or Miami with her new friends. These friends, I gathered from her social media, were uniformly wealthy, conventionally attractive, and connected to influential families. I tried to maintain our relationship by suggesting regular lunch dates when she was home. Nothing fancy, I would say, just a chance for us to catch up. These lunches, when they happened, became exercises in patience. Amanda would arrive late, check her phone constantly, and speak in distracted half-sentences that rarely invited real conversation. "How are your classes going?" I would ask. "Fine, super busy. Professor Jackson might connect me with an internship at Goldman next summer." Her attention already drifting to an incoming text. "Are you enjoying any of your non-business electives? I know you mentioned that photography class." A shrug. "It's whatever. Not really relevant to my career path." The daughter who once spent hours creating elaborate watercolor landscapes in my classroom had disappeared, replaced by someone who measured experiences solely by their resume value. During Amanda's junior year, she began dating Tyler Williams, whose father owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across the Southwest and had business connections with Harold. Tyler was conventionally handsome, impeccably dressed, and unfailingly polite, in the practiced way of someone raised in privilege. When Amanda brought him to meet me and Frank during spring break, his demeanor was cordial but distant. "So you both teach high school?" he asked over dinner at our home, his tone suggesting he was confirming a regrettable rumor. "Yes," Frank replied warmly. "Geraldine inspires the next generation of artists, and I try to get teenagers excited about chemistry." Tyler nodded with a tight smile. "That's commendable. My mother serves on several educational foundation boards. They do a lot of charity work for underfunded schools." The subtext was clear. Education was a worthy cause for the wealthy to support through charitable giving, not a respectable career choice. Throughout the evening, Tyler directed his more substantial comments to Frank, treating me with a polite dismissiveness that felt eerily familiar from my years with Harold. Amanda watched this dynamic with evident discomfort, but said nothing. Later, as they prepared to leave, I overheard Tyler in the driveway. "Your mum seems nice. Kind of simple, but nice." Amanda's response was too quiet to hear, but her lack of defense spoke volumes. Harold's approval of Tyler was immediate and enthusiastic. During one of our brief co-parenting communications, he mentioned, "Amanda's finally dating someone with appropriate ambitions and background. The Williams family has real influence in Arizona." The subtext was clear, unlike Frank, whom Harold had dismissed as another underachiever. The engagement announcement came during Amanda's senior year of college, announced at an elaborate party at Harold's country club. I learned about it through a text message sent after the fact. "Tyler proposed tonight. I said yes. We'll send details about wedding planning soon." No phone call, no chance to share in the moment, just a digital afterthought. When I was finally invited to participate in wedding planning, it became clear my role would be ceremonial at best. The first meeting at an upscale wedding venue included Harold, his current wife, Veronica Tyler's parents, and a celebrity wedding planner Harold had hired. I arrived with a small notebook containing a few thoughts, family traditions that might be meaningful, a suggestion for incorporating Amanda's artistic talents from childhood into the ceremony. "We're thinking a black tie affair for 400 guests," the wedding planner announced, barely acknowledging my arrival. "The Williams have connections with several A-list musicians who might perform at the reception." When I tentatively suggested incorporating some personal elements, perhaps displaying family photos, or including a reading that had special meaning to Amanda and me, her response was crushing. "Mom, I want a sophisticated wedding, nothing crafty or homemade," Amanda said with an embarrassed glance toward Tyler's mother. "We're aiming for elegant and exclusive, not sentimental." Each planning session followed the same pattern. Harold would make grandiose suggestions that the wedding planner enthusiastically endorsed. Tyler's parents would offer connections to exclusive vendors. Amanda would defer to their collective vision. My input was tolerated briefly, then politely dismissed. The rehearsal dinner held at an exclusive resort provided a preview of what was to come. Frank and I were seated at a table far from the main party, with distant relatives and office assistants. From across the room, I watched Harold give a glowing toast about "my beautiful daughter, following in my footsteps towards success." No mention was made of my role in raising Amanda my presence at school events. Harold had been too busy to attend the years of nurturing her creative spirit before status became her primary concern. As guests mingled after dinner, I overheard Amanda speaking with her bridesmaids near the bar. "Tomorrow will be perfect. My real family will be right up front. Dad, Veronica, the Williamses. Everyone who matters." The casual erasure stung more than any deliberate insult could have. That night back at our hotel, Frank held me as I cried. "You don't have to put yourself through this tomorrow," he said gently. "No one would blame you for protecting yourself." "She's still my daughter," I replied. "I need to be there even if she's forgotten what that means." The wedding day dawned clear and bright, a perfect Arizona spring day that seemed to mock my inner turmoil. Frank and I arrived at the exclusive resort venue early, dressed in our finest clothes. My sage green silk dress, purchased months ago for this occasion, Frank's new charcoal suit that had stretched our budget, but seemed necessary for such a formal event. The grounds were already bustling with activity, florists arranging elaborate displays of imported flowers, technicians setting up lighting, photographers scouting the best locations. Everything spoke of expense and extravagance, a celebration designed to impress rather than express genuine emotion. I made my way to the bridal suite, carrying a small gift box. Inside was a hand-painted silk scarf I had created for Amanda, featuring the desert wildflowers she had loved as a child. Hours of work had gone into it, each brushstroke a meditation on my love for my daughter, despite our growing distance. The suite was chaos of activity. Makeup artists, hairstylists, bridesmaids in matching robes sipping champagne. Amanda sat in the center, already transformed into someone I barely recognized. Her natural waves had been straightened and styled into an elaborate updo. Her makeup was flawless, but heavy, masking her freckles and the small scar above her eyebrow from a childhood fall. "Mom, you're early," she said, glancing at me briefly in the mirror. No hug, no warm greeting, just a statement of fact that carried a hint of inconvenience. "I wanted to give you this before things got too hectic," I explained, holding out the gift box. She opened it with manicured fingers, lifting the scarf with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "That's creative. Thank you." The scarf was immediately set aside, forgotten among the luxury brand bags containing bridesmaids' gifts. A wedding planner appeared at my elbow, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Miller, we need to get you seated soon. The premium guests are starting to arrive." Premium guests? As if family relationships had tiers of value. I was escorted to the ceremony site, a manicured lawn overlooking a golf course. Rows of white chairs had been arranged in a semicircle, each adorned with elaborate floral arrangements. I automatically moved toward the front, where parents of the bride traditionally sit. The planner placed a gentle but firm hand on my arm. "Your seat is actually back here," she said, leading me to the 8th row far to the side, where a single chair had a small, reserved card. "There must be a mistake," I said, confused. "I'm Amanda's mother." The woman consulted her clipboard, discomfort evident in her expression. I have specific instructions here about seating arrangements. This is your designated seat. Your husband will be next to you. She pointed to the chair beside mine, also in the 8th row. But surely the mother of the bride sits in front. I persisted, my heart beginning to race. I'm sorry, Mrs. Miller. These arrangements were approved by the bride personally. Her tone was sympathetic but firm. The front rows are reserved for Mr. Wilson, his wife, and the Williams family. As if to emphasize the point, I watched Harold and Veronica being escorted to prominent seats in the first row. Harold, impeccable in a designer tuxedo, nodded approvingly at the seating arrangement, while Veronica adjusted her diamond necklace. They looked like royalty taking their rightful places. Frank found me standing frozen near our assigned seats. "What's wrong?" he asked, immediately sensing my distress. I explained the situation in a whisper, trying to control the tremor in my voice. "This is ridiculous," Frank said, his usual calm demeanor giving way to anger. "We should leave. No one deserves to be treated this way, especially not by their own child." "I need to stay," I said quietly. "I need to see her married." Frank squeezed my hand in silent support as we took our seats far from where a mother should be on her daughter's wedding day. Around us, guests in expensive attire filed in, filling the sections closer to the front. I recognized business associates of Harold Tyler's extended family, even celebrities I had seen in magazines, all apparently more deserving of proximity to the bride than her own mother. The ceremony began with a string quartet playing classical music. The processional was elaborate, with 8 bridesmaids in designer gowns and an equal number of groomsmen. Then Amanda appeared, escorted by Harold, and my breath caught despite everything. She was beautiful in her couture gown, looking every inch the society bride. I searched her face for traces of the little girl who once sat on my lap with paint-smudged fingers, but those memories seemed to belong to a different lifetime. The officiant, a distinguished-looking man I didn't recognize, began with a greeting to the honored guests. His next words cut through me like glass. "We are gathered here today to celebrate the union of Amanda and Tyler, brought together through the communities of excellence their families have built. I want to especially thank Amanda's father, Harold Wilson, for his generosity in sponsoring this beautiful wedding and for raising such an accomplished daughter." Not a word about me. No acknowledgement of my role in bringing Amanda into the world, nurturing her through childhood, supporting her development. In this narrative, she was solely Harold's creation, a product of his wealth and influence. At one point during the ceremony, Amanda glanced back over the congregation. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw a flicker of something, perhaps discomfort or even guilt, cross her face before she turned back to her groom and the future he represented. The ceremony proceeded with perfectly scripted vows and flawless timing. When Amanda and Tyler were pronounced husband and wife, the assembled guests erupted in applause. I clapped mechanically, feeling increasingly disconnected from the spectacle before me. After the ceremony, guests were directed to a reception area for cocktails, while the wedding party took photographs. Frank and I followed the crowd, moving in a daze through the elegant space. I sipped water while around me people drank champagne and discussed the wedding of the season, as if it were a social coup rather than a family milestone. Eventually, the wedding party entered to more applause. A receiving line formed, and after nearly 40 minutes of waiting, Frank and I reached Amanda and Tyler. "Congratulations," I said, attempting to embrace my daughter. She accepted the hug stiffly, barely returning it before pulling away. "Thank you for coming," she said, as if I were a distant acquaintance rather than the woman who had given birth to her. The ceremony was beautiful. I managed searching for connection in her eyes. Amanda glanced past me to the growing line, clearly anxious to move on. When she looked back, her expression was distant. "Mum, I need to explain about the seating," she said in a low voice, pulling me slightly aside. "Dad paid for everything. Over $200,000 for this wedding. He's a somebody. The Williamses are somebodies." I waited, hoping for something that might ease the pain of her deliberate choice to position me as insignificant. Instead, She delivered the final blow. "You're just a teacher. You don't fit in with the big men here. It would look awkward in the photos." The words hit me with physical force. Just a teacher, a nobody, an embarrassment to be hidden in the back row so as not to taint the carefully curated image of success and influence. In that moment, something crystallized within me, a clarity about who my daughter had become and who I refused to be in response. I would not plead for recognition. I would not diminish myself to fit the narrative she and Harold had constructed. I looked directly into Amanda's eyes, seeing not just the status-obsessed woman before me, but also the child she had been and the values she had abandoned. With a calm that surprised even me, I said simply, "I hope you find what you're looking for." Then I turned, took Frank's hand, and walked away from the receiving line, away from the reception, away from the daughter who had decided I wasn't worthy of a place in her carefully constructed world. The drive home from the wedding venue was silent. Frank kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other firmly holding mine, offering wordless support as city lights blurred through my tears. Neither of us felt the need to dissect what had happened. The humiliation was too raw, the rejection too complete for analysis. When we arrived home, the modest ranch-style house we had lovingly maintained looked like a sanctuary. Frank unlocked the door and gently guided me inside, where I finally allowed myself to collapse on our living room sofa. "She called me a nobody." I whispered the words, catching in my throat. My own daughter. A nobody. Frank sat beside me, his arm around my shoulders. "She's wrong, Geraldine. So tragically wrong." I looked around our living room, suddenly seeing it through Amanda's critical eyes. The comfortable but well-worn furniture, the walls displaying student artwork alongside my own paintings, bookshelves filled with teaching resources and art history volumes. Nothing that would impress the big men, Amanda now valued above genuine connection. My gaze fell on a collection of framed photographs on our mantel. Amanda, through the years, gap-toothed in elementary school, proudly holding an art award I had encouraged her to compete for, beaming at her high school graduation with my arm around her shoulders. Moments from a relationship that now felt like fiction. When did I lose her, Frank? I asked the question that had haunted me for years, finally spoken aloud. Where did I go wrong? You didn't go wrong, he replied firmly. Harold's world seduced her. Money, status, influence. They're powerful attractions, especially when they're presented as the only measures of worth. I spent that night moving between numbing disbelief and acute pain. Sleep came in brief, troubled intervals. Each time I woke, the reality hit anew. I had been deemed unworthy of recognition at my only child's wedding, relegated to the background, like an embarrassing family secret. Morning arrived with harsh clarity. I checked my phone out of habit. No messages from Amanda. No acknowledgement of what had transpired, no morning after recognition of the hurt she had caused. Instead, social media was already flooding with professionally shot wedding photos. Harold featured prominently beside Amanda, in many his expression triumphant, as he walked her down the aisle, raised a toast, shared a choreographed father-daughter dance. I was nowhere visible in these carefully curated images. Not in the background, not in the group shots. It was as if I had never existed in Amanda's life, erased from the narrative that would be preserved and shared. The emotional toll made it impossible to face my students that day. For the first time in years, I called in sick, something I rarely did, even when physically ill. My department chair, Sarah, responded with immediate concern. Are you all right, Geraldine? Do you need anything? Just a mental health day, I replied, unable to explain the true reason. 2 hours later, a knock at my door revealed Sarah standing on my porch with a bag of pastries and coffee. I saw the wedding photos online, she said simply. I figured you might need a friend. As we sat at my kitchen table, I finally vocalized the full experience. The back row seat, the complete erasure of my role as mother, and Amanda's devastating explanation. Sarah listened without interruption, her expression shifting between shock and indignation. That's not just hurtful, Geraldine. It's cruel, she said when I finished. No one deserves that treatment, especially not from their child. The worst part, I admitted, is that part of me still wants to make excuses for her, to believe she was pressured by Harold or Tyler's family. Even if that were true, she's an adult who made her choices, Sarah pointed out gently. At some point, we have to hold people accountable for their actions, regardless of influences. After Sarah left, I found myself drawn to the spare bedroom where I had stored keepsakes from Amanda's childhood, opening boxes. I hadn't examined in years. I found artwork from elementary school, handmade Mother's Day cards with heartfelt messages, school essays where she had once written proudly about my teaching career. One card from when she was 9 read, "To the best mommy in the world. I want to be just like you when I grow up, because you help people find their talents." The contrast between that innocent declaration and yesterday's dismissal, "You're just a teacher," was so stark it prompted fresh tears. I spent the afternoon packing away these mementos, not in anger, but as a necessary step in accepting reality. The child who had created these tokens of love had transformed into someone unrecognizable, someone who viewed my life choices as embarrassing failures rather than meaningful contributions. The next day, I returned to school, finding unexpected solace in my classroom. My students, unaware of my personal turmoil, responded to my guidance with enthusiasm and appreciation. A sophomore girl thanked me profusely for helping her develop a portfolio for a summer art program. A senior boy showed me his college acceptance letter to an art school he hadn't believed he could attend until I encouraged him to apply. These small interactions became lifelines, reminders that my work had value, even if Amanda could no longer see it. Each day that passed without contact from her, as she and Tyler honeymooned at an exclusive resort in the Maldives according to social media, reinforced the message of the wedding. I had been relegated to the periphery of her life, an obligation to be managed rather than a relationship to be nurtured. Frank watched over me with loving concern during those first difficult weeks, suggesting activities he knew would bring comfort. Visits to art galleries, hiking in the desert landscapes I loved to paint, evenings with friends who valued us for who we were rather than what we possessed. "She'll reach out eventually," he predicted one evening as we sat on our patio, when the excitement fades and real life sets in. "Maybe," I replied, no longer certain I wanted that contact, if it came without recognition of the hurt inflicted. "But I'm not sure I'll be ready to hear from her when she does." The weeks following Amanda's wedding became a journey of self-reflection, unlike any I had experienced before. The public humiliation had cracked open questions I had avoided confronting about my relationship with my daughter, my identity beyond motherhood, and what I truly valued in life. My regular therapist, Dr. Melissa Kaufman, created a safe space to process these questions during our weekly sessions. In her comfortable office with desert landscapes on the walls, I gradually unpacked the complex emotions surrounding Amanda's rejection. "I keep wondering if I failed her somehow," I admitted during our second post-wedding session, "if I should have fought harder against Harold's influence." "Parenting isn't about winning," Dr. Kaufman observed. "You provided Amanda with an alternative value system to Harold's materialism. As an adult, she made her choice between those values. That's her responsibility, not your failure." We explored the history of my relationship with Amanda, identifying patterns that had developed after the divorce, how Harold's financial advantages had created an uneven playing field, how I had sometimes overcompensated by refusing to discuss money or status, perhaps inadvertently creating a taboo that made these topics more alluring to a teenager. "The wedding seating wasn't just about your relationship with Amanda," Dr. Kaufman suggested. "It was a physical manifestation of the values she's chosen to prioritize, appearances over authenticity, status over connection. The question now is how you protect your own well-being while leaving space for her to potentially recognize what she's lost." These sessions helped me realize I was mourning not just the current relationship with my adult daughter, but also the future I had imagined. Family holidays with grandchildren, the gradual transition to a friendship between adult women who respected each other's life choices. The wedding had made clear that this future might never materialize, at least not in the form I had envisioned. Outside therapy, Frank became my steadfast support and voice of reason. 3 weeks after the wedding, he suggested we take a long-planned trip to Santa Fe, New Mexico, a trip we had postponed when Amanda announced her engagement, wanting to be available for wedding preparations. "There's nothing holding us back now," he pointed out. "The art colony workshops are running all summer. It might be good to immerse yourself in creativity again." The suggestion was perfectly timed. I had been so consumed with teaching and then the wedding drama that my personal art practice had languished. The prospect of a week in Santa Fe's vibrant artistic community offered a way to reconnect with myself beyond the roles of teacher, mother, or wife. Santa Fe proved to be transformative. The adobe architecture, the quality of desert light, the community of artists who valued creativity above credentials, all combined to create an environment where I could breathe freely again. I participated in workshops on techniques I had never tried, experimenting with new media and approaches without concern for results. During a plein-air painting session at Ghost Ranch, I met Eleanor, a retired corporate executive who had left a high-powered career to pursue her artistic passions. Over shared lunches, she revealed her own family estrangement. "My son married into a family that values the things I walked away from," she explained. "He's embarrassed by my downgrade to artist, though I've never been happier. They invite me to major events but seat me with the distant relatives." "How do you handle it?" I asked, recognizing her experience as a mirror of my own. "I decided that I wouldn't diminish myself to fit into their narrative," she said simply. "I attend when invited, bring my authentic self, and leave when it becomes uncomfortable. I'm neither confrontational nor compliant. I'm just genuinely myself, and they can take it or leave it." Her words resonated deeply. I had spent years trying to navigate Amanda's increasing alignment with Harold's values without conflict, accepting her gradual distancing, overlooking subtle insults about my lifestyle, making myself smaller to avoid causing tension. The wedding had simply been the culmination of this pattern, the moment when the unspoken was finally spoken aloud. "You don't belong in our world." Another meaningful encounter came on our last day in Santa Fe at a gallery featuring emerging artists. A young woman approached me, her expression uncertain. "Mrs. Miller, Geraldine Miller, from Desert View High School." I turned to find a vaguely familiar face that quickly resolved into recognition. "Lucia Mendez, is that you?" Lucia had been my student nearly 10 years earlier, a talented but uncertain girl from a struggling immigrant family. She now stood before me as a poised young woman, one of the featured artists in the gallery show. "I can't believe you're here," she said, genuine delight in her voice. "I've wanted to thank you for years. You changed my life." Over coffee after the show, Lucia shared her journey. The art scholarship I had encouraged her to apply for, leading to college opportunities her family could never have afforded. The mentorship program I had connected her with. The confidence she had developed through my belief in her potential. "My parents wanted me to study something practical," she explained. "But you showed them my portfolio, helped them see that art could be a viable path. Now I make a living doing what I love, and they're proud of me." As Frank and I drove back to Arizona, I reflected on these encounters and what they revealed about the impact of my choices. "I've been measuring my worth through Amanda's eyes," I told him. "Seeing myself as she sees me, just a teacher, someone who failed to achieve the kind of success Harold values." "And now?" he asked. "Now I'm remembering that my definition of success was never about status or wealth. It was about making a difference, creating beauty, helping others discover their gifts." I watched the desert landscape passing outside my window. Maybe I need to recommit to those values instead of questioning them. Upon returning home, I channeled this renewed clarity into action. The after-school art program for underprivileged youth I had long considered starting now seemed urgent rather than optional. With Sarah's administrative support and a small grant from a local foundation, I launched Desert Voices, a program offering free art instruction to students from the most economically challenged areas of our district. The work was demanding, but deeply fulfilling. 3 afternoons a week, my classroom filled with young people who had limited access to creative outlets. Many came from homes where survival took precedence over self-expression, where art supplies were an unaffordable luxury. Watching them discover their artistic voices, develop technical skills, and build confidence became a powerful antidote to the pain of Amanda's rejection. One of my students, a quiet 14-year-old named Miguel, created a striking portrait of his grandmother that captured both her physical features and her dignified spirit. When he presented it to her at our first student exhibition, her tears of joy reminded me viscerally of what genuine appreciation looks like. Nothing like the polite dismissal Amanda had shown toward my handmade wedding gift. As weeks became months, the acute pain of the wedding incident gradually transformed into a more manageable sadness. I no longer woke with the shock of remembering Amanda's words. I could pass wedding photos in shop windows without feeling physically ill. The experience had changed me certainly, but was no longer defining my daily emotional reality. Then, 3 months after the wedding, a generic postcard arrived from Santorini, Greece. Amanda's handwriting on the back read simply, "Honeymoon destination number 3, beautiful here, hope you're well." No signature, no specific acknowledgement of our last interaction, no questions about my life. Just a perfunctory communication that could have been sent to a casual acquaintance. Frank found me staring at the postcard in our kitchen. "Are you going to respond?" he asked gently. "I don't think so," I replied after consideration. "This isn't an opening for real conversation. It's an obligation checkmark." My friends Sarah and Elena helped reinforce this boundary setting when I shared the postcard during our monthly dinner gathering. Elena, whose relationship with her own adult son had required careful boundaries, offered particularly valuable perspective. "Reconciliation requires acknowledgement of hurt," she pointed out. "This postcard skips over everything that happened and asks you to pretend it's all normal. That's not healthy for either of you." With their encouragement, I joined a support group for parents estranged from adult children. The weekly meetings in a community centre conference room became a safe harbour where experiences could be shared without judgment. Some parents had children who had cut contact entirely. Others, like me, maintained superficial connections that carefully avoided addressing deeper wounds. Martha, a retired nurse whose son had excluded her from his wedding 5 years earlier, became particularly important to my healing process. "The hardest part," she shared during one meeting, was accepting that I couldn't make him see the hurt he had caused. His perspective was so different from mine that we were essentially speaking different languages. "Have things improved?" I asked her. "Slowly, very slowly," she replied. When his first marriage ended, he experienced rejection himself for the first time. That created a small opening for empathy. We're rebuilding, but it's a different relationship now. I protect myself in ways I never needed to before. These conversations helped me develop a framework for potential future interactions with Amanda. I would neither chase her approval nor reject any genuine attempts at connection. I would maintain my dignity without becoming bitter. I would acknowledge my continuing love for her, while recognizing that the relationship might never again be what I had once hoped. Frank observed these changes with quiet approval. "You're standing taller," he commented one evening as we prepared dinner together. "Not just physically. There's something different about your presence." "I'm not waiting anymore," I realized aloud. Not for Amanda's approval, or for Harold's world to suddenly recognize my value. I'm fully inhabiting my own life instead of orbiting around their rejection. This hard-won equilibrium was about to be tested sooner than I expected. As autumn arrived in Arizona, bringing relief from summer heat, Amanda contacted me again, not with another impersonal postcard, but with a text message requesting to visit. "I'll be in town next Thursday. Could I stop by the house around 2? Just me, no Tyler." The message set my heart racing with conflicting emotions: hope for potential reconciliation, anxiety about another rejection, uncertainty about my own readiness for this conversation. After consulting with Frank and Dr. Kaufman, I replied with a simple, "Yes, that would be fine." The coming meeting loomed large in my thoughts. Would Amanda acknowledge what had happened at the wedding? Was she reaching out from genuine desire for connection, or from some other motivation? And perhaps most importantly, was I strong enough to maintain my boundaries while still offering the love? I continued to feel, despite everything. The afternoon Amanda was scheduled to visit brought unusually cloudy skies to Arizona, a fitting backdrop for the emotional uncertainty I felt as I moved restlessly through the house. Frank had offered to be present for support, but I had decided this first conversation needed to be between mother and daughter alone. "I'll be at the faculty meeting until 4, he said before leaving, kissing me gently. "Call if you need me to come home earlier." I spent the morning in my studio, finding calm through painting, rather than through the nervous cleaning or overthinking that tempted me. By the time 2 o'clock approached, I had centered myself as much as possible, remembering Dr. Kaufman's advice to remain present rather than anticipating Amanda's responses or rehearsing defenses. Amanda arrived precisely on time, pulling into our driveway in a luxury SUV that probably cost more than a year of my teaching salary. Through the window, I watched her check her appearance in the rearview mirror before approaching the front door, a gesture that reminded me painfully of Harold. When I opened the door, I was struck by how much she looked like a stranger. Her hair was highlighted and styled in an elegant bob that emphasized her cheekbones. Her casual outfit, designer jeans and a silk blouse, probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Diamond studs sparkled in her ears, matched by the substantial ring on her finger. "Hi, Mum," she said, her tone carefully casual, as if we had seen each other last week, rather than at a wedding, where she had deliberately humiliated me 3 months earlier. "Hello, Amanda," I replied, stepping back to allow her entry. "Come in." She moved past me into the living room, glancing around with the barely disguised assessment I had grown accustomed to in recent years. Nothing had changed significantly since her last visit before the wedding, but she surveyed the space as if cataloguing its deficiencies compared to her own home. "Would you like some tea?" I offered, falling back on social niceties to navigate the awkwardness. "Sure," she agreed, settling onto the sofa. "If you have green tea." In the kitchen, I took a moment to breathe deeply before arranging a tray with the requested tea and some homemade cookies. When I returned, Amanda was examining a new painting I had hung since her last visit, a desert landscape captured during my Santa Fe trip. "That's new," she observed. "Did you paint it?" "Yes, during a workshop in New Mexico this summer." "It's actually quite good," she said, sounding genuinely surprised. I chose not to address the backhanded nature of the compliment, instead asking, "How was your honeymoon? I received your postcard from Santorini." "Amazing. We did 3 weeks in the Mediterranean, then 2 weeks in Southeast Asia." She launched into a detailed account of luxury resorts, private tours, and exclusive experiences that seemed designed to emphasize the gap between our worlds, rather than bridge it. I listened politely, noting how she carefully avoided any meaningful personal revelations amid the travelogue. No mention of conversations with Tyler, moments of connection, or even conflicts. Just a catalogue of expensive experiences that could have been lifted from a travel magazine. When she finally paused for breath, I asked gently, "And how is married life now that you're settled back home?" Something flickered across her face, discomfort perhaps, or uncertainty. "It's an adjustment. Tyler works long hours at his father's company. We're still getting used to our routines." "That's natural," I offered. "Every marriage requires finding your rhythm together." She nodded, then shifted topics abruptly. "We've been looking at houses. Dad thinks we should buy in North Scottsdale, close to where he and Veronica live." "And what do you think?" I asked, genuinely curious about whether she had her own preferences. Amanda frowned slightly. "The houses there make sense for networking. All the right people are neighbors." She fidgeted with her wedding ring. "Dad's been very involved in the process. Sometimes a little too involved, honestly." "Oh, he has opinions about everything. Which neighborhoods have the right cachet? What features a home at our level should include?" Her voice held a note of frustration I hadn't expected. He even vetoed a house I really liked because it wasn't prestigious enough. That sounds challenging, I said carefully, recognizing an opening but not wanting to push too hard. It's important for you and Tyler to make your own choices about where you'll be happy. That's what I told Dad, but he just laughed and said I don't understand real estate as an investment. She sipped her tea, then added in a lower voice, "Sometimes it feels like I've traded one controlling father for another." The comment hung in the air between us, loaded with implications neither of us was quite ready to address directly. After a moment, Amanda seemed to realize what she'd revealed and quickly backtracked. "Anyway, we'll probably go with Dad's recommendation. He knows the market better than we do." We continued with similar surface-level conversation for nearly an hour, dancing around any topic of substance. Amanda spoke about Tyler's family connections, their new social circle plans for holiday travel. I shared neutral updates about my teaching and the after-school art program, carefully avoiding anything that might sound like a criticism of her values. Eventually, we reached a natural lull. I decided it was time to acknowledge the elephant in the room, even at the risk of disrupting the fragile civility we had maintained. "Amanda," I began gently, "I appreciate your visit today, but I'm curious about why you wanted to see me after what happened at the wedding." Her expression immediately closed. "The wedding? What about it?" The practiced innocence in her tone made it clear she was hoping to avoid this conversation entirely. I took a deep breath and continued with calm directness. "I'm referring to being seated in the back row away from the family, to not being acknowledged in any way during the ceremony, to being told I was just a teacher who didn't fit in with the big men at your wedding." Amanda's cheeks flushed slightly. "Mum, you're being oversensitive. The seating was arranged based on who contributed to the wedding. Dad paid for everything over $200,000. The Williamses made significant contributions too. So family relationships are determined by financial contributions?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the hurt her justification triggered. "Your father purchased the right to be acknowledged as your only parent." "It wasn't like that," she insisted, though her eyes wouldn't meet mine. "It was about what made sense for the occasion. Dad's position in the community, his business connections with the Williamses. And where did I fit in that calculation as your mother?" Amanda sighed with exasperation. "Why are you making such a big deal about this? It was just seating, Mum. Just a wedding." "It wasn't just seating," I replied, my voice finally betraying some emotion. "It was a public statement about my value in your life, about whether being your mother, raising you, supporting you, loving you, counted for anything compared to Harold's money and connections." She stood abruptly, moving to the window with her back to me. "You don't understand how these things work. Image matters in our circle. Appearances matter." "And I was bad for your image?" I asked quietly. "Not bad, just not what people expect." She turned back to face me. "Tyler's family is connected to some very influential people. Dad's business partners were there. Having my high school teacher mother in the spotlight would have been awkward." The casual cruelty of her assessment stunned me anew. "I see," I said after a moment. "And now, why are you here today if I'm still an embarrassment?" Something shifted in her expression, a crack in the polished facade she had maintained. "I don't know," she admitted, sounding younger suddenly. "Things with Tyler aren't exactly what I expected. His family has all these expectations about how we should live, where we should socialize, even when we should start having children." "That sounds difficult," I acknowledged, recognizing the irony of the situation. Amanda was beginning to experience the same status pressures she had so eagerly embraced. "Dad says I need to adapt, that this is how it works in successful families." She returned to the sofa, sitting heavily. "Tyler's becoming more like his father, too. Everything is about business connections and appearances. Last week, he criticized my outfit before a dinner with his father's clients, said it wasn't sophisticated enough. The parallel to Harold's treatment of me during our marriage was striking, but I chose not to point it out directly. Instead, I asked, What do you want from your marriage, Amanda? Beyond the status and connections? She looked genuinely confused by the question. What do you mean? I mean, what makes you happy in your relationship with Tyler? What do you enjoy doing together? How do you connect as people, not as social positions? We go to the right events. We're building our network. She frowned slightly. We're focused on our future. But what about your present, your day-to-day joy? Amanda had no immediate answer, her expression suggesting this perspective had never occurred to her. After a moment, she deflected with a hint of defensiveness. You wouldn't understand. You and Frank chose a different kind of life. Yes, we did, I agreed. We chose a life based on what brings us genuine fulfillment, rather than what impresses others. It's not as financially rewarding or socially prominent, but it's authentic to our values. Well, not everyone wants the same things, she replied, a familiar dismissiveness creeping back into her tone. I nodded, accepting the boundary she was establishing. You're right, and I won't pretend to understand the pressures of your social world. But Amanda, regardless of our different choices, what happened at the wedding hurt me deeply. Being your mother isn't a role I can simply set aside because it doesn't fit your current image. For a brief moment, genuine regret flickered across her face. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said, though the words lacked the depth of a true apology. I was just trying to make everything perfect. Perfect for whom? I asked gently. She had no answer for that. As Amanda prepared to leave nearly 2 hours after arriving, our conversation had covered significant ground without reaching any true resolution. The gulf between us remained, though perhaps with slightly more visibility across the divide. At the door, I spoke from my heart one final time. I will always love you, Amanda. That hasn't changed. But for us to have any relationship moving forward, it needs to be based on mutual respect. I won't accept being treated as an embarrassment or inconvenience again. She nodded, her expression unreadable. I'll call you soon, she said, a promise I had heard many times before. As I watched her drive away, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, sadness for what remained, broken, cautious hope that she might be beginning to question the values she had embraced, and most surprisingly, a sense of peace with the boundaries I had established. Frank found me in my studio later, applying paint with focused intensity to a new canvas. How did it go? He asked. Complicated, I replied. She's unhappy, though she doesn't quite realize it yet. Her perfect world is showing some cracks. And you? He asked, the question encompassing far more than just the afternoon's conversation. I considered carefully before answering. I'm okay. Regardless of what happens with Amanda, I know who I am and what matters to me. That's enough. The painting taking shape before me wasn't of Amanda or our relationship. It was a desert landscape at sunrise, light breaking over the horizon and transforming the shadows. A new day with all its uncertainty and possibility. 1 year after Amanda's wedding, Arizona's spring had returned in full glory, painting the desert with wildflowers and perfect blue skies. I stood in the high school gymnasium that had been transformed into an art gallery, watching nervously as community members browsed the work of my Desert Voices students. The program had grown beyond my initial vision, now serving over 60 young people from across the district. The local newspaper had published a feature about the program the previous week, highlighting not only the students' artistic achievements, but also the program's impact on academic engagement and community connection. My photograph appeared alongside quotes about the transformative power of creative expression for young people facing economic and social challenges. My phone buzzed in my pocket with a text notification. I checked it discreetly, surprised to see Amanda's name on the screen. Just saw the article about your art program. The student work looks amazing. Congratulations, Mom. The message was unexpected. In the months since her visit to my house, our communication had remained sporadic and superficial. Occasional text messages about holidays or family birthdays. A brief awkward lunch when she was in town for a friend's baby shower. Nothing suggesting any significant shift in our relationship or her perspective. I sent a simple thank you in response, not wanting to overinvest in what might be another passing moment of connection. Experience had taught me to maintain cautious boundaries while still leaving the door open for meaningful change. 20 minutes later, as I was speaking with a potential donor about expanding the program, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Turning, I found myself face to face with Amanda. "I hope it's okay that I came," she said, an uncertainty in her voice I hadn't heard since she was much younger. "The article mentioned the exhibition was today." "Of course it's okay," I replied, genuinely surprised by her presence. "I'm glad you're here." Amanda looked different somehow. Her clothing was still expensive but less obviously branded. Her makeup was lighter, her hair styled more naturally. Most noticeably, the constant checking of her phone that had characterized our previous interactions was absent. "Would you show me around?" she asked. "I'd like to see the students' work." For the next hour, I guided Amanda through the exhibition, introducing her to young artists who beamed with pride as they explained their creative processes. She listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that revealed genuine interest rather than polite obligation. "Their talent is incredible," she commented, as we paused before a powerful installation created by 3 teenage girls addressing cultural identity. "And they speak about their work with such confidence." "That's often the most important development," I explained. "Finding their voice, learning to express themselves authentically, and stand behind their creative choices." Amanda nodded slowly, her expression contemplative. "I used to love making art with you," she said quietly. "Do you remember those Sunday afternoons when we would spread newspapers across the kitchen table and experiment with different techniques?" "Of course I remember," I replied, touched by her recollection of those precious hours together. "You were fearless with colour, always willing to try bold combinations that I wouldn't have considered." "I miss that," she admitted, surprising me further. "The freedom of creating without worrying about whether it was good enough or impressive enough, just making something because it brought joy." Before I could respond, one of my youngest students rushed over, eager to show me that his watercolour had received a Best in Category ribbon. Amanda stepped back as I celebrated with him, but I noticed her watching our interaction with an expression I couldn't quite interpret, perhaps wistfulness or reflection. When the crowd began to thin and the event wound toward its conclusion, Amanda helped me collect empty punch cups and straighten chairs. Simple tasks she undertook without being asked, so different from her usual careful distance from anything resembling service work. "Could we get coffee?" she suggested as we finished. "There's something I'd like to talk to you about." At a nearby cafe, seated in a quiet corner, Amanda stirred her latte absently before meeting my eyes directly. "Tyler and I are separated," she said without preamble. "It's been 3 months." Though surprised by the news, I was more struck by the fact that she hadn't shared this significant development until now. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said genuinely. "Are you okay?" She gave a small, humorless laugh. "Depends on how you define okay. Dad thinks I'm making a catastrophic mistake. Tyler's family has essentially excommunicated me. Half our social circle has chosen sides, mostly his. That sounds incredibly difficult." "It is, but it's also—" She hesitated, searching for the right word, clarifying, like finally taking off glasses with the wrong prescription and seeing clearly for the first time in years. "What happened?" I asked, carefully, not wanting to press too hard, but sensing she wanted to talk. Amanda sighed. "Nothing dramatic. No affairs or abuse or addiction. Just the slow realization that we wanted fundamentally different things." She twisted her wedding ring, which I noticed she still wore. "Tyler wanted a wife who would prioritize his career, host the right parties, produce the right children at the right time, and never question the script we were following." "And that wasn't what you wanted?" I prompted gently when she paused. "I thought it was," she admitted. "I really believed that status and connections and the right address would make me happy. That's what Dad always taught me, what all my friends from college seemed to want." She looked out the window briefly before continuing. "But once I had it all, the perfect wedding, The perfect house, the perfect social calendar. I realized I felt nothing, just empty and exhausted from maintaining appearances. The vulnerability in her admission touched me deeply. "What do you want now?" I asked. "I don't know exactly," she said honestly. "But I know I want more than just being an accessory to someone else's success story. I want purpose, connection, maybe even creativity again." We talked for nearly 3 hours, the conversation flowing more naturally than it had in years. Amanda shared the details of her separation, how Tyler had been bewildered by her growing discontent with their life, unable to comprehend what was missing when they had achieved all the external markers of success. How Harold had intervened with increasing frustration, attempting to fix the situation with financial incentives and status-based reasoning. The turning point came when Dad offered to buy us a vacation home in Aspen if we would work things out, Amanda explained, as if another property would somehow address the emptiness I was feeling. That's when I realized I was following his script, not writing my own. She had moved out of the Scottsdale mansion into a modest downtown apartment, taken a marketing job with a non-profit arts organization rather than the prestigious firm Harold had connections with, and begun the painful process of discovering her own values apart from those she had absorbed from her father and his world. "It hasn't been easy," she acknowledged. "There are days I question everything, days I'm tempted to go back to the safety of that predetermined path. But then I remember how it felt to live without authenticity, and I keep moving forward." As our conversation wound down, Amanda finally addressed what I had been wondering throughout our unexpected reunion. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice steady but vulnerable. "Not just for the wedding, though, especially for that. For years of dismissing your choices, your career, your values. For treating you as less than because you didn't pursue wealth or status." "Thank you," I replied, simply recognizing the courage this acknowledgement required. "The art program you've built," she continued, "the difference you're making in those students' lives, that's real success. I see that now in a way I couldn't before." "It's one form of success," I agreed. "The kind that aligns with my values and brings me genuine fulfillment." "I'd like to learn from you," Amanda said, surprising me once more. "Not to become a teacher necessarily, but to reconnect with creativity, with making a difference beyond social appearances." "I'd like that too," I replied carefully, not wanting to overcommit emotionally to what might still be a temporary shift in perspective. "Perhaps you could volunteer with the program sometime if you're interested." "I'd love that," she said, with the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in years. In the weeks that followed, Amanda's words proved to be more than momentary inspiration. She began volunteering with Desert Voices twice a month, initially helping with administrative tasks, but gradually engaging directly with the students. Her marketing background proved valuable for our fundraising efforts, and her genuine interest in the young artists' work helped build their confidence. Harold's reaction to Amanda's new direction was predictably negative. When she mentioned her volunteer work during a rare dinner with him, he dismissed it as playing at charity and suggested she was wasting her potential on people who would never be able to advance her interests. For the first time in her life, Amanda stood her ground against her father's disapproval. "These people are talented young artists who deserve support," she told him firmly. "And the only potential I'm concerned about is the potential to live authentically and contribute something meaningful." Harold had stormed out of the restaurant, leaving Amanda to pay the bill. A symbolic moment that represented her growing independence from his financial control and value system. When Amanda shared this confrontation during one of our increasingly regular coffee meetings, I felt pride in her courage while recognizing the pain such a break must have caused. "He'll either adjust his expectations or maintain his distance," I observed. "Either way, you're establishing necessary boundaries." "I learned that from you," she replied, "watching you hold your ground at my wedding and after. You didn't cause a scene or make demands. You simply refused to diminish yourself to fit into someone else's narrative." As spring turned to summer, our relationship continued its careful rebuilding, not returning to what it had been during her childhood, but evolving into something new, a connection between adult women with growing mutual respect. The wounds of the wedding and years of dismissal hadn't magically healed, but they had scabbed over enough to allow movement forward. My retirement was approaching, scheduled for the end of the next school year after 35 years in the classroom. What had once seemed like a lonely threshold now felt like an opening to new possibilities. Frank and I had begun discussing more extensive travel, perhaps longer artistic residencies in communities across the Southwest. The Desert Voices program had secured stable funding and institutional support that would continue beyond my direct involvement. Life had acquired an unexpected richness, born from the very rejection that had once seemed devastating. By standing firm in my value as a teacher, artist, and person, regardless of wealth or status, I had not only maintained my dignity, but also perhaps helped my daughter begin questioning the false metrics by which she had been measuring her worth. On a warm evening in late August, I stood before a gathering of current and former students, colleagues, and community supporters at an early retirement celebration organized by the school. The gymnasium had been transformed once again, this time with displays chronicling my teaching career and the artwork of students I had mentored over 3.5 decades. As I looked out over the crowd, preparing to share some thoughts, I spotted Amanda standing near the back beside Frank, who gave me an encouraging thumbs up. She had come straight from work at the Arts Foundation, still in her business attire, but with paint smudges on her hands from helping young artists earlier in the day. Teaching has never been just anything to me. I began unconsciously echoing and reclaiming the dismissive phrase that had once wounded me so deeply. It has been my calling, my purpose, my way of contributing something meaningful to our collective future. I spoke briefly about the joy of witnessing creative awakening in young people, the privilege of being trusted with their vulnerable expressions, the satisfaction of seeing former students find their own paths to fulfillment, whether through art or entirely different fields. Success isn't measured by the size of your house or the exclusivity of your social circle. I continued making eye contact with various students in the audience. It's measured by the lives you touch, the authentic connections you form, and the courage to remain true to your values, even when doing so comes at a cost. After the formal program concluded, and while mingling with well-wishers, I noticed Amanda speaking animatedly with a group of my Desert Voices students. Her genuine engagement with these teenagers from backgrounds vastly different from her own privileged upbringing showed how far she had traveled from the woman who once dismissed them as irrelevant to her status-oriented world. When the crowd finally thinned, Amanda approached me with a small package wrapped in handmade paper. "It's not much," she said, uncharacteristically nervous. "Just something I've been working on." Inside was a small watercolor painting, clearly the work of a beginner returning to art after many years, but created with heartfelt intention. It showed two women sitting at an easel together, their features indistinct, but their posture suggesting both concentration and connection. "It's us," she explained unnecessarily. "From those Sunday afternoons when I was little. I've been taking a beginner's class at the community center, trying to reconnect with that part of myself." The simple gift, imperfect but sincere, moved me more than any expensive present ever could have. It represented not just a memory but a possible future, one where art and creativity might once again become a shared language between us. "It's beautiful," I said, meaning it despite the technical flaws. "Thank you." As Amanda, Frank, and I walked out to the parking lot together, Amanda said something that captured perfectly the journey we had traveled. "I used to think being seated at the back of my wedding was the worst thing that could happen," she reflected. "Now I realize it was actually the beginning of seeing clearly. Sometimes you need that distance to understand what really matters." I nodded, remembering my own thought in the aftermath of that painful day. Sometimes being seated at the back gives you the clearest view of what truly matters in life. The Arizona sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples as we said our goodbyes, promising to meet the following weekend when Amanda would help with a special Desert Voices workshop I was planning. Nothing was perfect or completely healed between us, but something authentic was growing in place of the performative relationship we had maintained for so many years. As I watched her drive away, I felt a deep sense of peace. The journey from public humiliation to personal reclamation had been painful, but ultimately transformative. By refusing to accept devaluation, by myself or others, I had not only preserved my dignity, but perhaps helped illuminate a different path for my daughter as well. Have you ever had to stand firm in your own worth when others tried to diminish you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the most important lessons come from our most painful experiences. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more tales of finding authentic value beyond appearances, and share with someone who might need this message today. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your worth isn't determined by your status, but by the authenticity and compassion you bring to each day.